Welcome to the Cozy Storytime, your peaceful space to unwind and relax. Before we start, make sure to subscribe and like the video for more cozy stories every night. Beyond the grand towers of Hogwarts, there lies a place few dare to tread. A forest that whispers in the dark, where unseen creatures lurk, and something older than time itself waits in silence. The battle in the Forbidden Forest. That night, I followed a clue I was never meant to find. My footsteps led me into the shadows of towering trees, into a place where the line between reality and something far darker began to blur. At first, there was only silence, the soft wind rustling through the leaves, the dim glow of moonlight slipping through the branches. But in the darkness, something was watching. Something that had been waiting for a long time. And tonight, you will walk with me down an unseen path toward the secrets hidden within the Forbidden Forest. Listen carefully and don't lose your way. The dormitory was unusually quiet that night. The faint flickering of candlelight cast long shadows on the ancient stone walls of Hogwarts. Outside, the wind whispered against the glass panes, carrying with it the distant hoots of owls flying over the Forbidden Forest. I lay in my bed, staring at the canopy above, unable to shake the strange feeling that had been lingering in my chest all day. I had felt it since dinner, a subtle tug in the back of my mind, as if something was calling me. At first, I dismissed it as exhaustion from a long day of classes, but as the night deepened, the sensation only grew stronger. It wasn't just my imagination, something was guiding me toward a discovery I had yet to make. With a sigh, I sat up, rubbing my tired eyes. My dormmates were fast asleep, their slow, steady breathing filling the room with a rhythmic calmness. The fire in the common room had long since died down, leaving only the soft glow of enchanted lanterns to provide any illumination. As I swung my legs over the edge of my bed, my toes brushed against something unusual, something that hadn't been there before. Frowning, I bent down and pulled it from the floor. It was a small, crumpled piece of parchment. My heart gave a sudden thump against my ribs as I carefully unfolded it, my fingers tracing the rough texture of the aged paper. The ink was faded but still legible, scrawled hastily as if written in a hurry. The secret lies in the Forbidden Forest. That was all it said. I stared at the message, my mind racing. Who had left it? Why had they placed it beneath my bed? I glanced around the room, but there was no sign of movement. No footsteps leading away, no shifting of blankets, nothing to indicate that anyone had been near my bed in the past few hours. My first instinct was that this was a prank. Some students had a habit of playing tricks on others, and while I wasn't usually a target, it wasn't impossible that someone wanted to see how I'd react. But something about this felt different. There was a weight to the words, a sense of urgency that I couldn't ignore. I considered waking one of my dorm mates, but what would I even say? That I found a mysterious note and now I had an overwhelming urge to follow it? They'd tell me to go back to sleep, that I was being ridiculous. Maybe they'd be right. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a random prank. The Forbidden Forest. It wasn't a place any student should go wandering into, not alone and certainly not in the middle of the night. But the note was calling to me, as if the very letters were alive, whispering their message straight into my thoughts. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. This was reckless, stupid even. If a professor caught me sneaking out, I'd be in trouble for sure. And if something dangerous lurked in the forest, well, I wouldn't exactly be the first student to go missing in those woods. And yet, despite all the logical reasons telling me to stay in bed, I found myself standing up, my mind already made up before I had even realized it. I moved carefully, making sure not to wake anyone as I grabbed my wand from the nightstand and slipped on my cloak. The castle was silent as I stepped out of the dormitory, my footsteps light against the cold stone floor. The flickering torches along the corridor cast eerie shadows that stretched and twisted against the walls, making me feel as though unseen eyes were watching my every move. I knew the patrol routes of the prefects and the professors who occasionally wandered the halls at night. I had memorized the quieter paths, the ones less likely to be traveled at this hour. Every turn, every corner, I moved with the kind of precision that only came from years of sneaking out past curfew. As I reached the grand staircase, the air grew colder. A chill ran down my spine, but I wasn't sure if it was from the night air or from the anticipation building inside me. The forbidden forest was just beyond the castle grounds, past Hagrid's hut and the pumpkin patch, past the fields where the thestrals sometimes roamed unseen to those who had never known loss. A part of me hesitated as I reached the gray oak doors leading outside. This was my last chance to turn back, to return to my warm bed and forget all about this foolish endeavor. But the note in my hand burned like a brand against my skin, its weight pressing against my palm as if urging me forward. I pushed the doors open. The night was crisp, the sky a deep, endless black dotted with stars. The moon hung low, its silver light spilling over the castle grounds, making everything look almost dreamlike. The forbidden forest loomed ahead, a vast sea of darkness that swallowed the landscape beyond. I took a deep breath, steadying myself before stepping onto the grass. My heart pounded against my ribs as I moved quickly, keeping close to the shadows. The castle behind me seemed to fade with each step I took, the warmth of its safety slipping away as the towering trees of the forest drew closer. The wind carried the scent of damp earth and moss, mingled with something faintly sweet, like the lingering presence of unseen magic. I tightened my grip on my wand, whispering a soft lumos. The tip of my wand glowed, casting a dim light that barely pushed back the darkness around me. The trees stretched high above, their branches weaving together like skeletal fingers blocking out the sky. The deeper I walked, the quieter it became, as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting. I swallowed hard, my footsteps slowing as I realized just how alone I was. The note had told me to come, but it hadn't told me what I was looking for. Had I been led here for a reason? Or had I just walked straight into a trap? A sudden rustling made me freeze. My breath hitched in my throat as I turned my wand toward the sound. A pair of glowing eyes stared back at me from the underbrush, unblinking. My pulse thundered in my ears, every muscle in my body screaming for me to run. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the creature vanished, melting into the darkness like a phantom. I exhaled shakily, taking a step forward before something on the ground caught my eye, a second piece of parchment, half buried beneath the leaves. I knelt down, my fingers brushing against the rough surface as I picked it up. My hands trembled as I unfolded it, the words on the page making my blood run cold. "You're not alone. Keep going." The ink was still wet. I wasn't sure if it was the night air or my own fear, but a shiver ran down my spine. Someone, something, was leading me deeper into the forbidden forest, and I had no choice but to follow. The parchment trembled slightly in my grasp, the weather from my own unsteady hands or the night breeze that slithered through the dense trees, I couldn't tell. The ink glistened faintly under the dim glow of my wand, as if it had been written mere moments ago. You're not alone. Keep going. My pulse pounded against my ribs like a drum, each beat reminding me that I had a choice: to turn back toward the safety of Hogwarts or to press forward into the unknown. The rational part of me, the part that had spent years hearing horror stories about the Forbidden Forest, begged me to leave. But another part, one that burned with curiosity and an undeniable sense of purpose, refused to turn away. I swallowed hard, stuffing the note into my pocket before gripping my wand tighter. "Nox," I whispered, extinguishing the light. The darkness rushed in immediately, swallowing me whole. My eyes took a moment to adjust to the faint silver glow of the moon filtering through the twisted branches overhead. It wasn't much, but it was enough to move without being a beacon in the shadows. Leaves crunched softly beneath my boots as I stepped forward, my breath shallow and controlled. The deeper I ventured, the more the world outside seemed to fade away. The usual sounds of the night, distant howls from the forbidden forest's many inhabitants, the rustling of unseen creatures in the undergrowth, felt eerily muted, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Then, a sound. A faint snap of a branch somewhere to my right. I froze, my fingers tightening around my wand. My heartbeat roared in my ears as I strained to listen. The silence stretched on, heavy and oppressive, until another sound came, a slow, deliberate footstep. Someone, or something, was there. Watching. I held my breath, pressing my back against the rough bark of a nearby tree. My fingers trembled slightly as I debated my next move. Should I reveal myself? Cast a spell? Or simply wait, hoping that whatever it was would pass me by? Before I could decide, another sound cut through the stillness, a whisper. It was faint, barely more than a breath against the wind, but it was enough to send a shiver down my spine. You shouldn't have come. The voice was neither hostile nor welcoming. It was simply there. A chill settled over me as I turned my head slowly, peering into the darkness beyond the trees. I could see nothing, only the endless stretch of black, broken occasionally by patches of silver moonlight. I swallowed my fear and forced my voice to remain steady. "Who's there?" I called, my whisper barely louder than the wind. Silence. For a long moment, nothing stirred. I almost convinced myself that I had imagined it until a figure stepped into the moonlight. It wasn't an animal, nor was it a beast. It was a person, draped in a dark cloak that blended seamlessly with the shadows of the trees. Their face was obscured by the hood, but I could see just enough to make out the sharp edges of their jaw and the faint gleam of their eyes as they studied me. "You shouldn't have come," they repeated, their voice softer this time, almost regretful. I swallowed hard. I didn't have a choice. The figure tilted their head slightly, as if considering my words. Then, without another sound, they turned and began walking deeper into the forest. I hesitated only for a second before following. Every step I took felt like a step away from the world I knew. The castle, my dormitory, the warmth of my bed, all of it felt distant now, as if it belonged to a different lifetime. The trees pressed in closer, their branches arching overhead like skeletal fingers weaving a cage of shadows. I wanted to ask the stranger who they were, why they had been waiting for me, and what they meant by their warning. But something about the heavy silence between us made me hold my tongue. It wasn't fear, exactly. It was more like reverence. The path we walked wasn't well trodden. The undergrowth was thick, the ground uneven. At times, I had to step over fallen branches or duck beneath low-hanging vines. The stranger moved with the ease of someone who had walked this path 100 times before. I, on the other hand, stumbled more than once, barely catching myself before falling. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the stranger came to a stop. We stood in a small clearing, the trees forming a tight circle around us. In the center, half buried beneath layers of moss and dirt, was a stone archway. It was ancient, its carvings withered by time, but even in the dim light, I could make out faint runes etched into the surface. I had never seen anything like it before. The stranger turned to face me, their eyes barely visible beneath the hood. "This is what you were meant to find." I took a cautious step forward, my gaze locked onto the archway. "What is it?" A pause. Then a whisper. "A doorway." My breath caught in my throat. A doorway to what? The stranger exhaled slowly. Something older than Hogwarts itself. Something that should have remained forgotten. The weight of their words settled heavily in my chest. I wanted to ask more, but before I could, the ground beneath my feet trembled. A low, guttural growl echoed through the clearing. We were not alone. The growl sent a shiver down my spine. It was deep and guttural, reverberating through the trees like a low thunderclap. My grip on my wand tightened instinctively as I turned in the direction of the sound. The forest, which had been unnervingly quiet just moments before, now seemed alive with tension. The stranger beside me remained perfectly still, their hooded heads slightly tilted as if listening, waiting. Then, the growl came again, closer this time. I swallowed hard, my eyes scanning the dense shadows between the trees. The moonlight barely penetrated the thick canopy above, leaving only patches of silvery light scattered across the forest floor. Something moved just beyond my line of sight. A shifting of darkness, too large to be a simple trick of the light. "Stay still," the stranger murmured, their voice barely more than a breath. I obeyed, though my heart was hammering so loudly I was certain whatever lurked beyond the trees could hear it. My fingers trembled slightly as I held my wand at the ready, but I didn't cast a spell, not yet. I didn't even know what I was up against. A pair of glowing eyes emerged from the blackness. Golden, unblinking, and predatory. They reflected the moonlight like shards of amber, fixed intently on us. Then, another set of eyes appeared beside them. And another. There were at least 3 of them, maybe more. Their bodies were still hidden in the shadows, but their slow, deliberate movements sent dry leaves rustling beneath their weight. The stranger beside me remained motionless. I could feel their tension, like a coiled spring ready to snap, but they made no move to attack. I forced myself to take a slow breath, willing my heartbeat to settle, though the fear pressing against my ribs made it difficult. Then, a shape emerged from the darkness. It was large, much larger than I had anticipated. A massive, feline-like creature with sleek black fur that seemed to drink in the light around it. Its eyes never left me, glowing with an unsettling intelligence. It moved with the eerie grace of a predator, each step careful, deliberate. Its shoulders rolled with effortless power as it padded closer, its massive paws barely making a sound. I recognized it immediately. A grim stalker. A rare, dangerous creature known for its ability to move undetected, its black fur allowing it to blend seamlessly into the shadows. They were said to be spirits of vengeance, appearing only to those marked by fate or by death. I wasn't sure which one applied to me. The Grimstalker let out another low growl, deep and resonant, its breath misting in the cold night air. Its companions remained hidden in the darkness, but I knew they were there, watching, waiting. "Why are they here?" I whispered, barely daring to move my lips. The stranger didn't answer immediately. When they finally spoke, their voice was calm but edged with something I couldn't quite place. "They guard the doorway. They do not let the unworthy pass." I forced my gaze away from the creature's glowing eyes and back to the stone archway behind us. The runes carved into its surface pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat beneath stone. A doorway, the stranger had called it. But to what? The Grimstalker took another step forward, and I instinctively took a step back. The stranger moved suddenly, lifting a hand and uttering something in a language I didn't recognize. The words rolled off their tongue like a forgotten melody, and for a moment, the air around us seemed to shift, vibrating with unseen energy. The Grimstalker paused. Its ears flicked back slightly, its eyes narrowing. The others in the shadows did the same, their glowing orbs flickering like candle flames in the dark. Then, the leader, the one closest to us, let out a low, rumbling sound, almost like a sigh. It did not sound pleased, but neither did it seem hostile. The creature lingered for a long moment before finally taking a slow step back. Then another. One by one, the eyes disappeared into the shadows. The rustling of leaves and shifting of branches faded, swallowed once more by the silence of the forbidden forest. I let out a shaky breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "What was that?" I asked, turning toward the stranger. "What did you say to them?" The hooded figure was quiet for a moment before answering. "A promise." I frowned. "A promise of what?" The stranger exhaled softly. "That if you are truly meant to be here, you will prove it soon enough." I wasn't sure if that was meant to be reassuring or ominous. Maybe both. My gaze drifted back to the archway. Even without the Grimstalkers there to guard it, the doorway seemed to hum with an invisible energy, its presence undeniable. I stepped closer, brushing my fingers against the rough stone. The moment my skin made contact, a faint warmth pulsed beneath my fingertips, as if something inside the stone recognized me. I pulled my hand back quickly, my heart racing. The stranger studied me for a long moment before finally speaking. "It is not a doorway in the way you understand. It does not lead to a place, but to a truth." I turned to face them fully. "And what truth is that?" The wind stirred, carrying the scent of damp earth and something older, something ancient. The stranger's voice was soft when they answered. "The truth of why you were called here." My fingers curled into a fist at my side. I could feel it now, the weight of something unseen pressing against me, urging me forward. I had followed the note. I had stepped into the forest. And now, I stood before something far bigger than I had anticipated. A choice lay before me. And I knew, deep in my bones, that turning back was no longer an option. The stone archway loomed before me, ancient and unmoving, yet it pulsed with something almost alive beneath its withered carvings. The warmth I had felt against my fingertips still lingered, like an echo beneath my skin. The stranger's words repeated in my mind, "It does not lead to a place, but to a truth." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. What happens if I go through? The stranger didn't answer immediately. Instead, they stepped closer to the archway, gloved fingers brushing over the runes carved into the stone. They were silent for a long moment before finally speaking, their voice quiet yet firm. "Once you enter, there is no turning back. The forest itself will ensure that." I turned sharply to face them. "What do you mean?" The hooded figure met my gaze, and for the first time, I caught a glimpse of their eyes, dark and knowing, filled with something ancient and unreadable. "The forbidden forest has always been more than trees and shadows," they said. "It is alive. It watches. It chooses who may leave and who must stay." A cold shiver ran through me. "So if I go through this doorway, you must find the truth it holds, or you will never leave this place." The weight of those words settled in my chest like a stone. The rational part of my mind screamed at me to turn back, to return to the safety of Hogwarts before it was too late. But another part, the part that had led me here in the first place, refused to waver. I had come too far to turn back now. Taking a steadying breath, I squared my shoulders and stepped closer to the archway. The warmth from the stone pulsed again, stronger this time, as if recognizing my decision. I turned back to the stranger one last time. "Will you come with me?" They hesitated, then shook their head. "This is not my path to walk." I exhaled slowly. "Will I see you again?" A ghost of a smile flickered beneath their hood. "Perhaps. If you find your way back." Not the most reassuring answer. I turned back toward the archway, steeling myself. The runes carved into the stone seemed to glow faintly, a soft pulse of light traveling along their ancient patterns. The hum in the air grew stronger, wrapping around me like an unseen force, urging me forward. One last breath. And then I stepped through. For a moment, there was nothing. No sound, no air, no ground beneath my feet. Just an endless, weightless void that swallowed me whole. Panic surged in my chest, my limbs tensing as if bracing for something unseen. But before I could react, the world around me shifted. A rush of warmth enveloped me, like stepping through a curtain of sunlight. My boots found solid ground again, and I stumbled slightly before catching myself. My pulse thundered in my ears as I glanced around, trying to make sense of my surroundings. I was still in the forest. Or at least, something that resembled it. The trees stood tall around me, but they were different. Their trunks twisted unnaturally, their bark shimmering with an otherworldly sheen. The leaves overhead glowed faintly, casting an eerie blue light that bathed the entire area in an unnatural glow. The air smelled of earth and something electric, like the charge before a storm. I turned in a slow circle, trying to orient myself. The archway was gone. No trace of it remained, just endless forest stretching in every direction. A realization settled in my chest like ice. I was no longer in the forbidden forest. At least, not the one I had known. A soft rustling echoed from behind me. My breath caught, and I spun around, wand raised. Nothing. Just the swaying of strange, glowing leaves. Then, another sound, whispering. It was faint, carried by an unseen wind, the words just beyond my grasp. I turned again, trying to pinpoint the source, but it seemed to come from all around me. The whispers slithered through the trees like unseen specters, their voices overlapping, calling, beckoning. I clenched my jaw, forcing down the unease twisting in my gut. Think, I told myself. Don't panic. I needed to figure out where I was, and more importantly, how to get out. I took a cautious step forward, then another, careful not to make too much noise. The ground beneath my feet was soft, almost too soft, as if I were walking on something alive. The air was thick with energy, humming with something unseen. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. A figure, standing just at the edge of my vision. I froze. It wasn't the stranger from before. This figure was different, taller, thinner, draped in something that shimmered like liquid shadow. Its face was obscured, its features lost in the dim glow of the forest, but I could feel its gaze locked onto me. My grip on my wand tightened. "Who are you?" I demanded, forcing my voice to remain steady. The figure did not move, did not speak. It simply watched. A chill crawled down my spine. My instinct screamed at me to back away, to put as much distance between myself and this thing as possible. But I held my ground, refusing to show fear. Then, the whispers returned. This time, they spoke my name. My breath hitched. The sound came from everywhere at once, echoing through the glowing trees like a chorus of unseen voices. Calling me. Knowing me. I took a slow step back, my pulse hammering in my ears. The figure remained unmoving, its presence looming like a shadow that had taken shape. Then, it took a step forward. I reacted on instinct. Lumos Maxima. A blinding burst of light exploded from my wand, illuminating the clearing with a searing brilliance. The whispers screeched, twisting into something sharp and piercing. The figure vanished, dissolving into the air like smoke. The light faded, and I was alone again. Panting, I lowered my wand, my hands shaking. Whatever that had been, it was not human. And it had known my name. I needed to move. Fast. Gritting my teeth, I turned and pressed forward into the unknown, leaving the vanished figure and its whispering specters behind. Whatever this place was, whatever truth it held, I would find it. And I would find my way back. Because the one thing I knew for certain was this. Something in this forest wanted me to stay. I pressed forward, each step cautious, each breath measured. The strange, glowing trees stretched endlessly in every direction, their eerie blue light casting long, shifting shadows across the forest floor. The air around me felt thick, as if I were wading through something unseen. The whispers had faded, but the memory of them still clung to my skin, like a chill that refused to leave. I needed to find a way out. But where was out? There was no archway behind me. No familiar landmarks. Just an expanse of strange, unnatural forest stretching into the unknown. I tightened my grip on my wand and kept moving. The silence was worse than the whispers. It made my own footsteps sound impossibly loud, the rustling of leaves beneath my boots like a warning call to whatever lurked unseen. I forced myself to focus, to scan the shadows carefully. Then, something caught my eye. A flicker of movement just ahead, near the base of a gnarled tree. I halted, my breath hitching. My first instinct was to raise my wand, to prepare for whatever might be waiting. But as I stepped closer, I realized it wasn't a creature. It was a cloak. Or at least, what remained of one. The fabric was tattered and damp, partially buried beneath the moss and glowing foliage. The edges were torn as if something had clawed at it. Slowly, I knelt and brushed away the dirt, revealing a small crest embroidered on what was left of the fabric. My stomach dropped. It was the Hogwarts crest. I swallowed, my fingers tightening around the fabric. Someone else had been here. A student. But when? And where were they now? A gust of cold wind swept through the trees, rustling the leaves in an almost deliberate way, like a whisper just at the edge of my hearing. I tensed, suddenly hyper-aware of how alone I was. No, not alone. Something was watching me. I turned sharply, wand raised. Lumos. The tip of my wand flared to life, casting long, twisting shadows across the trees. The wind stilled, the air thick with waiting silence. And then, I saw them. Not one. Many. Figures, just beyond the reach of my light. Their shapes blurred and indistinct, shifting like smoke caught in a breeze. They stood among the trees, unmoving, their presence pressing against the air like an unseen weight. I forced myself to take a slow step back. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice steady despite the fear curling in my chest. The figures did not answer. They simply stood there, watching. And then, one of them moved. A slow, deliberate step forward. The dim glow of the trees illuminated just enough of its form for me to see it was wearing Hogwarts robes. Torn, faded, but unmistakable. My breath caught in my throat. "Are you a student?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The figure stopped. The air between us crackled with something unseen. Then, a voice, so quiet it was almost part of the wind. "We were." A chill ran down my spine. "We walked where you walk. We searched as you search." The other figures shifted slightly, their blurred forms flickering at the edge of my vision. My grip on my wand tightened. Search for what? Silence. Then, a way back. The words hung in the air like a ghostly echo, heavy with something I couldn't quite grasp. The figure in the tattered Hogwarts robes took another slow step forward, and this time I caught a glimpse of their face. Or rather, the absence of one. A hollow void where features should have been. An empty, shifting darkness that pulsed with something unnatural. My breath hitched, my body frozen between fight and flight. I had seen ghosts before. But this was not a ghost. This was something else. Something wrong. "Do not follow the whispers," the figure said, its voice a brittle echo. I swallowed hard, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. "What are you?" For the first time, the figure hesitated. Its hollow face tilted slightly, as if considering my question. Then, it spoke again. "What you will become if you do not leave." The words struck me harder than I expected. I took a slow, careful step back. "You were trapped here." A pause. Then, "We still are." The wind stirred again, carrying the scent of damp earth and something ancient. The figures did not move closer, but their presence pressed against me like a silent warning. "Go back," the voice urged. before you cannot. I wanted to listen. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to turn around, to run. But there was nowhere to run. There was no way back. I exhaled shakily, forcing down the fear clawing at my ribs. How do I leave? The figure in the Hogwarts robes remained still. The others watched, unmoving. For a long, terrible moment, I thought they wouldn't answer. Then, finally, find what binds you here. I frowned. I don't understand. But the figures were already fading, dissolving into the air like mist caught in the wind. Their hollow voices lingered for only a second longer before vanishing entirely. I was alone again. The silence pressed in, suffocating. My mind spun with the weight of their words. Find what binds me here. I turned my gaze back to the tattered cloak in my hand. The Hogwarts crest was barely visible now, faded with time and exposure. How many had come before me? How many had been trapped here, just as I was now? I wasn't about to become one of them. Steeling myself, I rose to my feet. The wind stirred once more, carrying with it a single, whispered word. Hurry. I didn't wait to be told twice. With a final glance at the empty space where the figures had stood, I turned and pressed forward into the unknown. The forest stretched endlessly ahead, its eerie blue glow illuminating the path in an unnatural shimmer. The air was thick, not with mist or fog, but with something unseen, something ancient. The words of the faceless figures still rang in my ears. Find what binds you here. I didn't know what that meant, but I knew one thing for certain. I had no intention of becoming one of them. My fingers tightened around my wand as I moved forward, careful not to make too much noise. Every step felt heavier than the last, as if the very air around me resisted my presence. The glowing trees whispered with unseen voices, their leaves rustling in a breeze I could not feel. Then, ahead of me, the forest began to change. The trees grew taller, their twisted trunks pressing closer together. The blue glow that had bathed everything in its eerie light began to fade, replaced by a dull, muted silver. The path beneath my feet narrowed, winding in ways that didn't make sense, as if the forest itself was shifting around me. I exhaled slowly. Keep moving. Minutes passed. Maybe hours. Time felt wrong here, slipping through my fingers like water. The silence pressed in, heavy and waiting. Then I heard it. A soft scraping sound, like stone grinding against stone. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. The sound came from just ahead, past a cluster of dense, knotted trees. Carefully, I edged forward, my heart pounding. The trees parted, revealing a clearing, and at its center stood a statue. No, not just a statue. A figure, carved from smooth, pale stone. It was seated upon a weathered throne, its form draped in a long, flowing cloak. The face was hidden beneath a deep hood, its features lost to shadow. Though unmoving, the presence of the statue filled the clearing with an oppressive weight, as if it were watching. The grinding noise came again. Then, to my horror, the statue moved. Its head tilted ever so slightly, the stone shifting with a sound like cracking ice. My pulse thundered in my ears. Then, a voice, low, ancient, and heavy as the earth itself, rumbled through the clearing. You should not be here. The ground trembled beneath my feet. My instinct screamed at me to run, but I forced myself to hold my ground. My fingers tightened around my wand. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my ribs. The statue was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, it rose from its throne. The air shuddered with the movement, as if the entire forest responded to its presence. "I am the keeper." A shiver ran down my spine. The keeper of what? Again, silence. Then, the forgotten. Something about the way it said that word sent a chill through me. I swallowed hard. What does that mean? The statue took a slow step forward, the weight of its presence pressing down on me like an unseen force. "Those who wander too far," it said. "Those who seek what should not be sought." My mind raced. Was it talking about the faceless figures I had seen before? The lost students? I took a careful step back. "I'm just trying to find my way out." The keeper was silent for a moment. Then you seek what does not exist." The word struck me like a blow. "What?" I breathed. "There is no way out," the keeper said. "Not until you understand what brought you here." A knot tightened in my chest. "I don't understand." The keeper tilted its head slightly, as if studying me. "You carry something that does not belong." My heart stuttered. "What?" The keeper raised a hand, a slow, deliberate motion that sent ripples through the air itself. And then, something in my pocket began to burn. I sucked in a sharp breath, my hand flying to my robes. A warmth, subtle at first but growing stronger, pulsed beneath the fabric. Slowly, hesitantly, I reached into my pocket and pulled out the pendant. The silver pendant I had found on the forest floor. The one I had picked up without thinking. The moment it was exposed to the open air, the forest reacted. The wind howled through the trees. The ground trembled beneath me. The blue glow of the leaves flared, pulsing like a heartbeat. The keeper did not move, but its presence intensified, pressing against me with an unseen weight. "Where did you find that?" the keeper demanded, its voice deeper, sharper. I swallowed hard. "In the forest." It was just lying there. The statue exhaled a sound like grinding stone. Nothing is simply left in this place. I looked down at the pendant in my palm. It was small, unassuming, a delicate silver chain with a single, circular charm. But now that I really looked at it, I realized there were runes carved into its surface. Runes I didn't recognize. I glanced back up at the keeper. "What is it?" The air around us seemed to darken. The glowing trees dimmed. The keeper took another step forward, the movement slow and deliberate. "It is the tether," it said. A cold dread crept over me. The tether to what? The keeper's hooded face tilted slightly. "To this place." The words sank in, heavy and suffocating. The pendant was what bound me here. What had bound the others before me? I clenched my jaw. Then how do I break it? For the first time, the keeper was silent. The wind stilled. The forest held its breath. Then, finally, "That is not for me to decide." A tremor of frustration rippled through me. "Then who?" The keeper slowly turned its head, gazing past me, into the depths of the forest. The one who waits. The moment the words left its mouth, a sudden, violent gust of wind ripped through the clearing. The trees shuddered. The light flickered. The pendant in my hand burned with an unseen force. And then, far in the distance, a sound. Low. Hollow. Like a voice calling from beyond the veil. I turned sharply, my breath catching. The sound called again, a deep, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate through my very bones. The keeper did not move. But when it spoke again, its voice was almost gentle. Go. Before it finds you first. I didn't hesitate. Clutching the pendant tightly, I turned and ran. I ran. The forest blurred around me, its eerie blue glow flickering like candlelight in a storm. The trees twisted unnaturally, their branches bending in directions that made no sense. The wind howled through the leaves, carrying with it the remnants of a voice, low, distant, calling. I didn't stop. The pendant in my grip pulsed with warmth, growing hotter with each step. It was as if the very air around me recognized it, reacted to it. The keeper's words rang in my mind. Go. Before it finds you first. Who was it? The one who waits. Something was in this forest. Something ancient. Something watching. A sharp crack echoed through the trees, and the ground beneath me trembled. My foot caught on an exposed root, and I stumbled, barely catching myself before I hit the dirt. My breathing was ragged, my chest burning from the exertion, but I couldn't stop. A deep, resonant hum vibrated through the air again, closer this time. It wasn't a sound, it was a presence. A weight pressing against my mind, as if something was reaching for me from beyond the veil of reality. Then, the trees ended. I burst into another clearing, this one vast and open, bathed in a sickly silver light. The ground beneath me was different, too smooth, like polished stone instead of forest earth. The air itself seemed thicker, and the sky above was wrong, black, empty, not a single star in sight. And at the center of the clearing, it waited. A figure. Tall, cloaked, its form barely distinguishable from the shadows that stretched unnaturally across the clearing. It stood unnervingly still, its presence warping the space around it. I froze. The air hummed. My pulse thundered in my ears. Then it moved. Not like something stepping forward, like something shifting between moments, one instant in place, the next closer. I barely swallowed my gasp. A voice, low, layered, as if multiple voices spoke at once, rippled through the air. You carry what is mine. My fingers clenched around the pendant instinctively. Who are you? I forced out, trying to keep my voice steady. The figure tilted its head slightly. The shadows around it shivered. I am the one who remains when all else is lost. A cold dread slithered down my spine. The others, I said, swallowing. The ones who were trapped before me. Did you? The figure did not answer. But it didn't need to. I knew. It took another step, closer, impossibly fast, though I never saw it move. My heart pounded, my instinct screaming at me to run, but my feet wouldn't obey. You do not belong here, the voice whispered. Then let me leave, I managed, my throat dry. The figure tilted its head again. A flicker of something unreadable passed through the air between us. You already know the answer. My grip on the pendant tightened. The tether. This thing, this entity, was bound to it. Just as I was. I had taken something that did not belong to me. I had unknowingly linked myself to this place. And now, it was not letting go. The shadows thickened around the figure, stretching toward me like unseen hands. My breath hitched as the air around me turned suffocating, pressing against my chest like a weight I couldn't shake. Return what is mine, it said. The pendant burned in my hand. I looked down at it, my mind racing. If I gave it back, would it let me go? Or would I become like the others? A forgotten echo, lost in this place forever? My pulse thundered. I couldn't make that mistake. I had to break the tether. Gritting my teeth, I forced my hand to move. The pendant pulsed as I lifted my wand, my instinct screaming for me to destroy it. The entity shifted. The air shuddered. And then, it was right in front of me. I didn't think. Finite incantatum. I roared, aiming my wand at the pendant. The moment the spell struck, the world exploded in white light. A scream, not human, not entirely real, ripped through the clearing. The ground trembled violently beneath me. The trees bent backward as if recoiling, and the sky above cracked, splintering like glass. The pendant fractured in my palm. The entity recoiled, its form shredding, breaking apart into flickering shadows that dispersed into the void. Its voice rang through my skull, distant, furious. You cannot erase what is forgotten. Then, silence. The air stilled. The forest shifted. And I was falling. I was falling. The world around me twisted and bent, the shattered fragments of the sky warping like ink in water. A deafening silence pressed against my ears, more terrifying than the entity's voice. My stomach lurched as the weightlessness took hold, no ground beneath me, no sense of direction. Just an endless descent into the unknown. The pendant was gone. The tether was broken. Had I freed myself, or had I doomed myself to something worse? A sudden force yanked at me. My body jerked violently, and my surroundings changed in an instant. The blue glow of the forest, the towering trees, the unnatural clearing, gone. I landed hard on solid ground, the breath knocked out of my lungs. My vision blurred as pain jolted through my limbs. A few moments passed before I could move again. Slowly, I pushed myself up onto my hands and knees, my fingers digging into the dirt. Dirt. Real, soft earth. Not the strange, smooth stone of that cursed clearing. Not the suffocating void of nothingness. I was back. The forbidden forest stretched around me, its usual darkness pressing in, familiar yet foreign after what I had just witnessed. The eerie glow that had guided me before was gone. No whispers in the trees, no shifting shadows. Only the quiet rustling of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. I sat back, my breath still unsteady. Had it really ended? Shakily, I raised my wand and whispered, Lumos. The tip of my wand flared to life, casting a warm, golden glow over my surroundings. I took in the sight of the familiar gnarled trees, the damp underbrush, the faint outlines of a path leading back toward Hogwarts. A way out. Relief washed over me, but it was quickly followed by a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. My body felt drained, as if every bit of magic had been wrung out of me. I forced myself to my feet, ignoring the way my legs trembled beneath me. I needed to leave. I turned toward the path, my steps slow and unsteady. The forbidden forest had always been dangerous, but this had been something else. Something beyond my understanding, beyond anything I had read in any book. And yet, it had been real. The faceless figures. The keeper. The one who waits. They had all been real. I swallowed hard, my fingers clenching around my wand. I had been lucky. As I walked, I kept my senses sharp, half expecting the forest to pull me back, to refuse to let me go. But the further I moved, the lighter the air became. The weight that had pressed against me for what felt like hours, days, maybe, began to lift. The sky above was no longer that empty void. Through the breaks in the tree canopy, I could see stars, real stars, glittering against the dark expanse of night. Then, up ahead, a light. My heart leapt. It was faint, flickering through the trees, but it was unmistakable. The castle. Hogwarts. The sight of it nearly brought me to my knees. I pressed forward, my body screaming in protest, my limbs heavy with exhaustion. But I didn't stop. I wouldn't stop. Step by step, I moved toward the castle. Toward safety. Toward home. Underscore 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 underscore. I stumbled through the entrance of the castle, the warmth of the stone corridors enveloping me like a forgotten memory. The shift from the cold, damp air of the forest to the familiar embrace of Hogwarts was almost overwhelming. For a moment, I just stood there, breathing, taking in the reality of my return. The walls, the torches flickering along the corridors, the distant echoes of footsteps from students who had no idea what had just happened beyond the safety of these halls. It felt unreal. A voice broke through the silence. "Merlin's beard, where have you been?" I turned sharply. A figure rushed toward me, Professor McGonagall, her usually composed face etched with something dangerously close to fear. I opened my mouth, but the words wouldn't come. How could I even begin to explain? Her sharp eyes took in my disheveled state, the dirt on my robes, the exhaustion in my stance. "Come with me. Now." I followed her without protest. My legs felt like lead, my mind clouded with the remnants of the nightmare I had just escaped. Minutes later, I was seated in McGonagall's office, the warmth of a crackling fireplace doing little to chase away the lingering chill in my bones. A steaming cup of tea was placed in front of me, but I barely acknowledged it. She sat across from me, her expression unreadable. "Explain," she said simply. I hesitated, my fingers gripping the edge of the chair. How much could I say? Would she believe me? Would anyone? Swallowing hard, I forced myself to speak. I was in the forbidden forest. McGonagall's lips thinned. I gathered that much. You were missing for nearly a full day. I flinched. A full day? It had felt like an eternity, but also like no time at all. I took a deep breath. I found something, I said carefully. A pendant. McGonagall's expression changed. It was subtle, a flicker of recognition of something deeper. Describe it, she said. I did. Every detail. The silver chain, the runes I didn't recognize, the way it had burned in my hand when I stood before the keeper. When I finished, McGonagall was silent. Her fingers steepled together, her gaze sharp. Then, she said something that sent a fresh chill through me. That pendant has been missing for over 100 years. My breath caught. What? Her eyes locked onto mine. It belonged to a student. One who vanished into the forbidden forest and was never seen again. A heavy silence settled between us. The weight of it, the implications, pressed down on my chest. I had carried a piece of someone else's fate. Someone who had never made it back. McGonagall sighed, her expression softening just slightly. You're lucky to be alive. I knew that. I knew that more than anyone. She studied me for a moment longer before standing. Go. Rest. We'll talk more in the morning. I nodded numbly, rising to my feet. My limbs felt impossibly heavy as I made my way back to my dormitory. By the time I collapsed onto my bed, exhaustion finally took over. And for the first time since stepping into that cursed forest, I slept. But in the depths of my dreams, far beyond the veil of sleep, a whisper echoed. A voice, faint and distant, carried on the wind. You cannot erase what is forgotten. The night is quiet once more. The forbidden forest is behind me now, its secrets remain hidden in the shadows. Step by step, I return to Hogwarts, to the warm glow of candlelight, the sturdy stone walls, to a place that feels like home. But the whispers in the dark, the shadows lurking between the trees, will always be there, waiting. For now, though, it is over. You are safe. Close your eyes. Take a deep breath. Let the night carry you into peaceful dreams. Sleep well, and remember, some secrets are best left buried in the dark.